It was a quiet evening in the town of Pinewood. Snow had been falling all day, covering the streets, the rooftops, and the trees with a thick white blanket. The air was cold, but the town felt peaceful. Most people were inside their homes, drinking warm tea or sitting by the fire. The sound of the snow under boots or tires was the only noise that broke the stillness. Officer Daniel had been patrolling the streets for a few hours. He loved his job, but nights like this could feel long. He drove slowly through the empty streets, watching for anything unusual. The town was small, so unusual things often stood out quickly. His patrol car's headlights cut through the falling snow, reflecting off the white streets. The cold air seeped through the car doors every time he opened them. As he turned a corner near the edge of the forest, something caught his eye. At first it looked like a shadow moving in the snow, but Daniel knew the forest was quiet at this hour. He slowed the car and carefully drove closer. The shadow became clearer. It was a small figure tied to a post near an old abandoned cabin. Daniel stepped out of the car. The snow crunched under his boots. The wind was biting and his breath formed clouds in the cold air. As he approached, he saw that it was a dog. The dog's fur was wet and matted with snow, and it shivered uncontrollably. Its small body trembled as it tried to pull free from the rope. Its eyes were wide, full of fear and sadness. Daniel's heart tightened at the sight. "Hey there, buddy," Daniel said softly, keeping his voice calm and gentle. "It's okay. I'm here to help you." The dog tilted its head slightly, but it did not move closer. Its tail was low and stiff, and it whimpered softly. Daniel noticed the dog was thin, its ribs showing slightly under the fur. It had obviously been left outside for a long time. The collar around its neck was old and torn. There was no tag with a name or address. Daniel quickly untied the rope. The dog flinched at first, but when it realized it was free, it pressed its small body against him. Daniel wrapped the dog in his coat. The warmth from his body made the dog shiver less, but it still trembled from the cold. "You're safe now," Daniel said, stroking the dog's head. "I won't let anything happen to you." He carefully lifted the dog and walked back to the patrol car. The dog looked at him with big, trusting eyes, as if it already knew he was there to protect it. Daniel placed the dog gently on the passenger seat and buckled it in with a seatbelt. The little dog tilted its head, watching him, then leaned against the door, closing its eyes for a moment. Daniel started the car and drove slowly back toward the station. The town streets were quiet, and the snow continued to fall softly. The dog looked out the window, its nose twitching at the cold wind that blew through the slightly open window. Daniel noticed that the dog kept looking toward the forest, tilting its head as if it was trying to say something. The sight made Daniel frown. He had rescued many animals before, but this one seemed different. It was almost as if it wanted him to go back to the forest. He kept driving toward the station, but decided he would investigate further once he made sure the dog was safe and warm. By the time they reached the station, Daniel had made up his mind. He needed to know why someone would leave a dog tied up in the snow. The thought of anyone harming a helpless animal made him angry. He parked the car, carrying the dog inside carefully. The warmth of the station was a relief for both of them. The dog shook slightly as if it was still cold, but it seemed to calm down quickly. Daniel set a blanket on a chair and placed the dog on it. He went to the kitchen and brought a bowl of warm water and a little food he had for the station dog. The dog sniffed the bowl carefully, then began eating slowly. Daniel watched it, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. He had saved the dog from a very cold and dangerous night. After the dog finished eating, Daniel sat down beside it. He looked into its eyes and whispered, "I'll find out who did this to you. You don't have to be afraid anymore." He decided to name the dog Snow. It was a simple name, but it seemed perfect for the little dog who had been left alone in the snow. Snow leaned against Daniel, closing its eyes, finally feeling safe for the first time in hours. Daniel's thoughts went back to the forest and the abandoned cabin. Something about the place felt strange. The rope that had tied Snow was old, but the way the dog had been left alone did not feel like an accident. Someone must have known that the dog could not survive the night alone. Daniel made a promise to himself that he would investigate thoroughly. After making a report, Daniel took Snow to the back room where he kept supplies for rescued animals. He gave Snow a small towel to dry off and a soft blanket to sleep on. Snow curled up immediately, tired from the cold and hunger. Daniel watched the little dog, feeling a strange connection. It was as if Snow had been waiting for him, not just for safety but for someone who could understand it. The next morning, Daniel returned to the forest with the intention of searching for clues. Snow stayed in the patrol car, looking at him with trusting eyes. The morning sun reflected off the snow, making the forest look peaceful. But Daniel knew appearances could be deceiving. The abandoned cabin was still there, quiet and empty, but he noticed something he had not seen in the dark. Small paw prints led from the cabin into the deeper forest. Daniel followed the trail carefully. The footprints were fresh, as if someone had passed by recently. His heart raced with curiosity and concern. He knew he had to find out who had left Snow in the snow and why. The forest grew thicker as he moved forward, but the footprints continued, leading him deeper into the trees. Meanwhile, back at the station, Snow waited patiently. The little dog lay on the blanket, occasionally lifting its head to look at the door as if knowing that Daniel would return. Snow seemed different from other animals Daniel had rescued. It had a presence, a quiet strength that made him feel that it was not just a normal dog. Hours later, Daniel returned to the station. He had not found any person, but there were signs of someone moving through the forest. Tracks and broken branches told him that someone had been there, but it was not clear who. Daniel felt a chill, not from the cold, but from the thought that Snow had been left there intentionally. Someone had wanted to hurt the little dog or perhaps teach it a lesson. He looked at Snow, who wagged its tail slightly. Daniel smiled. "Don't worry, Snow, I'll make sure you are safe. I will not let anyone hurt you again." From that day on, Daniel took care of Snow like he was part of his family. He fed him, played with him, and made sure he was warm and happy. Snow in return gave Daniel loyalty and companionship. Every day, Daniel noticed how smart and brave Snow was. The little dog seemed to understand things beyond ordinary dogs. It would watch Daniel carefully, as if it knew what he was thinking, and sometimes it would guide him to places he needed to check. Daniel never forgot the sight of Snow tied in the snow. The memory stayed with him, making him more determined to protect animals and find those who were cruel to them. Snow had survived a harsh night, but it had not just survived. It had touched Daniel's heart and changed his life. From that moment, Daniel and Snow became inseparable. Snow was no longer a lost, scared dog in the snow. He was a friend, a companion, and a symbol of hope. And Daniel knew that whatever mysteries lay ahead, with Snow by his side, he could face them all. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the town of Pinewood. Snow still covered the streets, glistening in the soft light. Officer Daniel was awake early, checking his patrol reports and making notes about the abandoned cabin in the forest. Snow, the little brown dog, stretched on his blanket and yawned. His tail wagged slightly as he looked up at Daniel, sensing that today would be another day full of activity. Daniel had decided to investigate more about the cabin and the forest. He had called the local animal shelter and asked if anyone had reported a lost dog matching Snow's description. So far, there had been no reports. That meant the dog had been left alone intentionally. The thought made Daniel's chest tighten. After breakfast, Daniel packed some supplies. He brought a first aid kit, a flashlight, and a notebook. Snow watched curiously as Daniel put the items into a backpack. Daniel knelt down and patted Snow's head. "We are going to see if we can find some answers today," he said softly. Snow barked quietly and wagged his tail, as if understanding exactly what Daniel meant. They drove slowly to the edge of the forest. The snow was soft and deep, making footprints clear as they walked. Daniel led the way, carefully looking at the tracks in the snow. Snow followed closely, sniffing the air and occasionally looking at Daniel as if giving him silent advice. The little dog seemed unusually alert, and Daniel felt reassured by his presence. The abandoned cabin came into view. It was old and made of wood, with icicles hanging from the roof. The door was slightly open, swaying in the cold wind. Daniel approached cautiously. He looked around and noticed marks on the ground. Snow's paws stirred the snow as he sniffed around. Daniel bent down and examined the prints. They were small, but it was clear that someone had been there recently. Daniel made a decision. He would search inside the cabin. Snow stayed close to his side, ready to follow. Inside, the cabin was dark and cold. Dust covered the floor and the walls were worn. Daniel carefully looked around. There were old boxes stacked in one corner and some broken furniture scattered around. He shined his flashlight into the corners, trying to find any clues. Then something caught Snow's attention. The little dog barked softly and ran toward a small hole in the floor near the back wall. Daniel followed quickly and looked down. The hole led to a small underground space. It was dark and narrow, but Daniel could see movement inside. He called softly, "Hello? Is someone down there?" A small voice answered, trembling and quiet. "Please, help me." Daniel's heart raced. He moved carefully and opened the hole wider. Inside was a young girl no older than 10. She was sitting on the floor shivering, with a thin blanket wrapped around her. Her eyes were wide with fear. Snow barked gently and ran to her side, nuzzling her hand. Daniel quickly helped the girl out of the hole and wrapped her in his coat. "It's okay. You're safe now," he said, keeping his voice calm. The girl's lips trembled, but she seemed relieved. "My name is Lily," she whispered. I didn't know where to go." Daniel looked at her carefully. She was thin and her clothes were wet from the snow. Someone had clearly left her in the cold, just like Snow. Daniel felt a wave of anger and sadness. "Don't worry, Lily, I'm Officer Daniel. I'm going to take care of you." Snow stayed close, wagging his tail and nuzzling Lily gently. She smiled faintly, feeling some comfort from the little dog. Daniel led them both to the patrol car. He wrapped Lily in a thick blanket and made sure she was warm. Snow sat on her lap, keeping her company as they drove back to the station. At the station, Daniel made her comfortable in a quiet room. He brought her some warm food and water. Lily ate slowly, but she seemed to regain her strength. Daniel sat nearby, taking notes and trying to understand how this could have happened. "Do you know who left you in the forest?" Daniel asked gently. Lily shook her head. I don't remember. I was outside and then it got very cold. I tried to find my way home, but I got lost. Then I saw Snow and I stayed close to him. He kept me from freezing." Daniel looked at Snow with admiration. The little dog had been her protector, just as he had been Snow's protector. "You're a brave dog," Daniel said, scratching behind Snow's ears. Snow wagged his tail and barked softly. Daniel knew he had to call the authorities and the local community to search for anyone responsible. At the same time, he could not ignore the connection between Snow and Lily. It was as if Snow had guided Daniel to her, leading him to someone in need. While Daniel made calls and arrangements, Lily began to speak more. She told him about how she had been playing near the edge of the forest when she had wandered too far. Snow had appeared as if by magic, keeping her company until Daniel found them. Daniel wrote everything down carefully, realizing how unusual the situation was. By the afternoon, the local community was aware of the incident. Volunteers helped provide warm clothes, blankets, and food. Social workers arrived to take care of Lily and ensure she was safe. Daniel stayed nearby, watching over them both. He knew this was just the beginning. Someone had left both Snow and Lily in the forest, and that person needed to be found. Later, Daniel took Snow outside for a short walk. Snow led him toward a part of the forest they had not explored. The little dog ran ahead, sniffing the air and stopping occasionally to look back at Daniel. It was clear that Snow wanted him to follow. Daniel trusted the dog and moved carefully through the snow. Soon they discovered a small trail leading deeper into the forest. There were signs of recent movement, broken branches, footprints, and marks in the snow. Daniel's heart pounded. Whoever had left Snow and Lily here had been active recently. He needed to find more evidence before anyone else could be harmed. Snow barked and ran toward a group of trees. Daniel followed and found something strange. Hidden under a pile of snow was a small box. Inside were items that belonged to Lily, a scarf, a small toy, and a notebook. Daniel realized that whoever had done this was trying to make it appear accidental, but the careful hiding of the items suggested something more deliberate. Daniel took the items carefully and noted their location. Snow sniffed around, clearly aware that this was an important discovery. The little dog's intelligence and bravery amazed Daniel. He had never seen an animal so alert and protective. Back at the station, Daniel placed the items on a table and began to organize his investigation. He had a growing sense that this was not a simple accident. Someone had left both Snow and Lily in danger, perhaps on purpose. But the question remained, why? And who could do something so cruel? Daniel looked at Snow, who sat patiently beside him. "You led me here, didn't you?" he said softly. Snow barked once and wagged his tail. Daniel smiled. "We're going to figure this out together." By evening, the station was quiet again. Lily was resting comfortably and Snow lay at her side. Daniel reviewed all the notes and evidence, feeling a mix of determination and worry. The mystery of the abandoned cabin, the forest, and the people responsible was only beginning. One thing was certain. Snow had not only survived the cold night, but he had also guided Daniel to someone in need. And Daniel knew that with Snow's help, he could uncover the truth, protect the innocent, and bring justice to those who had caused harm. The little dog had saved a life, and now Daniel was determined to make sure that Snow's courage and loyalty were not wasted. Whatever dangers lay ahead, Daniel and Snow would face them together, protecting those who could not protect themselves. As the snow fell softly outside the station windows, Daniel felt a sense of hope. The town of Pinewood might be quiet, but heroes could appear anywhere, even in the smallest forms. Snow had proven that, and Daniel knew that the adventure was far from over. The following morning, Pinewood was calm but cold. Snow still covered the town like a soft white blanket. Officer Daniel woke early, his mind focused on the mystery surrounding the abandoned cabin and the events of the previous day. He glanced at Snow, who was already awake and stretching on his blanket. The little dog wagged his tail when he saw Daniel, clearly ready for another day of adventure. Daniel knew he had to continue the investigation. Lily was safe for now, but someone had left her in danger, and that person was still unknown. He packed his backpack with supplies, a camera, and a notebook. Snow watched as Daniel prepared, his ears perked and eyes alert. Daniel knelt down and patted Snow's head. "You're coming with me. I need your help again." Snow barked softly and ran to the door, ready to go. The two of them drove to the edge of the forest. Daniel parked the patrol car near the abandoned cabin, and they started walking through the snow toward the trees. Snow led the way, sniffing the air and occasionally stopping to look back at Daniel. It was clear that the little dog had a purpose. Daniel followed carefully, examining footprints and broken branches. Snow stopped suddenly near a group of trees and barked quietly. Daniel looked around and noticed a small path hidden under the snow. The footprints were fresh and led deeper into the forest. Daniel felt a chill in his chest, not from the cold, but from the thought that whoever had left Snow and Lily here might still be nearby. They moved slowly and quietly. The forest was silent except for the crunching of snow beneath their boots. Daniel's flashlight reflected off the icy branches, creating strange shadows. Snow barked again and ran ahead. Daniel followed, and soon they found a small clearing. In the center of the clearing was a small shack partially hidden by trees. Smoke was rising from a tiny chimney, and it was clear that someone was inside. Daniel crouched behind a tree, observing. He could see a figure moving inside the shack, carrying a small bag. The person did not notice them. Daniel's heart raced. Could this person be the one who had left Lily and Snow in the forest? He needed to be careful. He took out his phone and quietly called the station. "This is Officer Daniel. I think I have found the person responsible for leaving the girl and the dog in the forest. Do not approach yet. I will need backup." He ended the call and looked at Snow. The little dog seemed to understand the situation. Snow barked softly as if saying, "We will catch them together." Daniel nodded. While they waited for backup, Daniel observed the figure in the shack. It was a young man, probably no older than 20. He seemed nervous, constantly looking outside as if he feared being seen. Daniel noticed items scattered around the shack that belonged to Lily. Her scarf, her small toy, and the notebook. Daniel knew they had found the person responsible. He waited quietly with Snow until the backup arrived. Police cars and officers arrived silently, surrounding the shack. Daniel moved forward, motioning for the young man to come out. The man stepped outside, hands raised. His face was pale, and he looked frightened. Daniel approached carefully, keeping Snow close. "You left a child and a dog in the forest," Daniel said firmly. "Do you understand how dangerous that was?" The young man nodded, tears in his eyes. I didn't mean to hurt them. I didn't know what to do. I thought someone else would take care of them." Daniel listened carefully. Lily was very cold and scared. Snow protected her. If I had not found her in time, something terrible could have happened. The young man's shoulders slumped. I just wanted to play a trick, but I didn't think it would get this far. I'm sorry. I never wanted anyone to get hurt." Daniel nodded, keeping his voice calm but firm. "You need to understand that actions like this can be very dangerous. People and animals can get hurt or worse. You will have to explain your actions to the authorities and make sure this never happens again." The young man agreed, looking genuinely remorseful. Backup officers took him into custody to ask questions and make sure he understood the seriousness of his actions. Daniel felt a sense of relief. The mystery of why Lily and Snow had been left in the forest was now partly solved. Daniel returned to the station with Snow. Lily was waiting, and her eyes lit up when she saw them. Snow ran to her, wagging his tail. She hugged the little dog tightly. "Thank you, Snow," she said softly. "You kept me safe." Daniel smiled. "You both are safe now. That is what matters." After a quiet afternoon, Daniel decided to spend some time with Lily and Snow. He played a simple game in the station yard, letting Snow chase a small ball while Lily laughed. It was the first time in days that they both seemed relaxed. Snow darted through the snow, his little paws leaving tracks everywhere. Lily followed, giggling, throwing the ball again and again. Daniel watched them, feeling grateful for Snow's bravery. The little dog had not only survived the cold but had also guided Daniel to help Lily. Without Snow, the girl might still have been lost in the forest. Daniel's heart filled with admiration for the tiny creature who had such courage and intelligence. Later that evening, Daniel sat down with Lily and Snow inside the station. Lily was drawing pictures of Snow in the forest. She colored the little dog brown and the Snow bright white. Daniel looked at the drawings and smiled. "You're a good artist, Lily. These pictures tell a story about bravery and friendship." Lily smiled shyly. "Snow is my hero," she said. She hugged the little dog again. Snow wagged his tail happily, resting his head on her shoulder. Daniel could see that the bond between them had grown stronger with every passing hour. Daniel knew that life in Pinewood would return to normal soon. Lily would be reunited with her family, and Snow would continue to be his loyal companion. But he also knew that this experience had changed them all. They had learned about courage, loyalty, and the importance of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. As the night fell, Daniel checked the security cameras near the station and the forest edge. He wanted to make sure that no one else would attempt something dangerous. Snow sat beside him, watching the screens with attentive eyes. Daniel realized that the little dog had a special ability to sense danger and lead him in the right direction. Daniel felt a wave of pride and gratitude. Snow had saved a life, helped him solve a mystery, and reminded him of the importance of kindness and vigilance. He patted the dog gently. "You did an amazing job today, Snow. I'm proud of you." Snow barked softly as if acknowledging the praise. Lily, still nearby, smiled. "He really is amazing," she said. Daniel thought about the events of the past 2 days. He had found a dog tied in the snow, rescued him, and then discovered a young girl in danger. It had been a chain of events that seemed impossible, but with courage, attention, and trust in Snow, he had been able to help both of them. He knew that this was only the beginning. Snow had a gift for sensing danger and guiding people to safety. Daniel decided that he would continue to work with Snow, not only in helping animals but also in keeping Pinewood safe. The town might look calm and quiet, but they both knew that heroes could appear at any moment, even in the form of a small, brave dog. That night, as Daniel watched Snow sleep peacefully beside Lily, he felt a deep sense of hope. The little dog had changed lives, and he had reminded Daniel that courage and loyalty could come in the smallest packages. Daniel smiled quietly, knowing that tomorrow would bring new adventures and challenges, and that he and Snow would face them together. The snow fell softly outside the station windows, covering Pinewood in a blanket of white. Inside, warmth, safety, and friendship filled the room. Snow had been the link that brought them all together, and Daniel knew that nothing would ever break the bond between the brave little dog, the rescued girl, and the officer who had chosen to follow his heart. The morning after the rescue was calm but filled with quiet determination. Officer Daniel woke early as usual and checked the weather outside. Snow still covered the streets of Pinewood, sparkling in the weak sunlight. He looked at Snow, who was already awake, stretching his little legs and wagging his tail. Snow seemed unusually alert today, as if he could sense that something important was about to happen. Daniel quickly prepared a backpack with supplies, flashlight, notebook, camera, and a few treats for Snow. He knelt and patted the little dog's head. "Ready for another adventure, Snow?" he asked. Snow barked softly, circling excitedly and nudging the backpack with his nose. Daniel smiled. He knew Snow had a gift for sensing things that others could not. Today, Daniel had a plan. He wanted to investigate deeper into the forest and the abandoned cabin to find any more clues. The young man who had left Lily and Snow in the forest had been questioned, but Daniel felt there was more to the story. Snow had led him before, and he trusted that the little dog would guide him again. As they walked toward the edge of the forest, the cold air stung their cheeks. Snow ran ahead, sniffing the snow-covered ground and occasionally looking back to make sure Daniel was following. The forest was quiet, but the snow made every sound loud. Branches creaked under the weight of the snow, and the crunch of their boots echoed among the trees. They reached the abandoned cabin. Daniel looked at it carefully. The small building seemed peaceful under the morning light, but he knew danger or secrets could hide anywhere. Snow sniffed around the perimeter, his tail high and ears alert. Daniel noticed paw prints in the snow that did not belong to Snow. They were small and light, possibly made by a child or a young animal. Daniel crouched to examine the tracks. "Interesting," he muttered. Snow barked softly as if agreeing. Daniel followed the footprints toward the edge of the forest, deeper into the trees. The path was narrow, covered with fallen branches and soft snow. Snow led confidently, moving faster than Daniel could walk comfortably. Suddenly, Snow stopped and sniffed the air. His ears perked and he barked sharply. Daniel looked in the direction Snow was pointing and saw a small figure moving quickly behind a tree. It was a little girl, not Lily, but someone who looked frightened and cold. She held a small blanket close to her chest, shivering in the cold. Daniel called gently, "Hello." "It's okay. We won't hurt you." The girl froze, her eyes wide with fear. Snow ran forward, wagging his tail, and barked again, nudging her gently with his nose. The girl hesitated, but then slowly stepped closer. Comforted by the little dog, Daniel knelt and spoke softly. "Hi, I'm Officer Daniel. This is Snow. You're safe now."
"Can you tell me your name?"
The girl's voice trembled. I'm Mia. I got lost when I was walking near the forest. I couldn't find my way home." Daniel wrapped his coat around her and led her toward the patrol car. Snow stayed close, making sure she did not fall behind. The little girl leaned against Snow, finding comfort in his warmth and presence. Daniel felt a mixture of relief and concern. 2 children had been in danger near the forest, and Snow had saved both of them. Once they reached the station, Daniel made Mia comfortable. He gave her a warm drink and a blanket, while Snow sat beside her, wagging his tail. Lily, who was already at the station, watched curiously and smiled. "Snow really is amazing," she said. Mia nodded, looking at the dog with admiration. Daniel began asking Mia questions gently. She explained that she had wandered into the forest while playing and became lost when she followed a small path she had never noticed before. "I saw something moving and got scared," she said. "Then I hid behind a tree and Snow found me." Daniel looked at Snow and smiled. "You did it again, Snow. You really are a brave little dog." Snow barked happily and wagged his tail. He seemed proud of his accomplishment, as if he understood the praise. Daniel realized that the forest held more secrets than he had first imagined. Someone had been leaving children and animals in dangerous situations. He needed to find out who else could be involved. With Snow's help, he could search the area more carefully. Later, Daniel and Snow returned to the forest. This time they moved slowly and carefully, checking every corner and path. Snow sniffed and followed trails that Daniel could barely see. He noticed broken branches, footprints, and small items hidden under the snow. Some were toys, others were pieces of clothing. Each clue told a story of someone being left alone in the cold. As the afternoon sun lowered in the sky, Daniel and Snow reached a small clearing. There, under a tree, they found a tiny notebook partially buried in the snow. Daniel picked it up and opened it. The pages were filled with notes, drawings, and names. Many of the entries were about children who had wandered near the forest. Some pages mentioned animals. Daniel realized that the person responsible had been planning these dangerous situations for some time. Snow barked softly and nudged Daniel's leg. Daniel looked down at him. "Yes, I see it too, Snow. We need to act fast." Daniel carefully packed the notebook and decided to return to the station. He knew they had gathered enough evidence to alert the authorities and ensure that no one else would be left in danger. Snow ran beside him, excited and alert, ready to continue the search if needed. Back at the station, Daniel organized the notebook and made copies of important pages. He contacted social services and local law enforcement, explaining the situation. Both Lily and Mia were safe, but other children or animals could still be at risk. Daniel knew that immediate action was necessary. Later that evening, Daniel sat with Snow, Lily, and Mia in the quiet warmth of the station. The little dog lay on a blanket between the two girls. They petted him gently, smiling and talking softly. Snow wagged his tail, enjoying the attention, but his eyes remained alert. Daniel could see that Snow still sensed danger nearby. Daniel spoke to the girls. "You both are safe now. Snow protected you, and we will make sure nothing like this happens again. You did nothing wrong. The responsibility is on the person who left you in the forest." Lily and Mia nodded. "Thank you, Snow," they said together. Snow barked once, as if acknowledging their gratitude. Daniel smiled. He knew that this little dog had changed the lives of these children forever. That night, Daniel prepared a plan. He would patrol the forest more often and work with social services to ensure that children were safe near the area. Snow would continue to guide him, using his instincts and intelligence to help others. Daniel realized that Snow was not just a dog. He was a hero, a protector, and a loyal companion who had saved lives and brought hope to those in danger. As the snow fell softly outside the station windows, Daniel watched the little dog sleep peacefully between Lily and Mia. He felt a deep sense of gratitude and admiration. Snow had shown courage, loyalty, and intelligence beyond what Daniel had expected. Together, they had rescued two children and uncovered evidence that could prevent future danger. Daniel knew that tomorrow might bring new challenges, but with Snow by his side, he was ready for anything. The bond between the officer and the dog had grown stronger with every passing day. They had become a team, united by trust, courage, and a shared mission to protect the innocent. As the night deepened, Daniel whispered to Snow, "You're amazing, little one. You've saved lives, and I will make sure the world knows about your bravery." Snow twitched in his sleep, as if understanding the words. Daniel smiled and looked at the girls. They were finally calm, finally safe. And that was the most important thing. The snow continued to fall outside, covering Pinewood in a soft white blanket. Inside, warmth, safety, and friendship filled the station. Snow had not only guided Daniel to children in need, but he had also reminded everyone that heroes come in all shapes and sizes. Even a small dog with courage and a kind heart could make a difference in the world. Daniel felt hopeful as he watched the night sky through the window. Tomorrow they would continue their work. Together, Daniel and Snow would face any danger that came their way, protecting those who could not protect themselves. And with every bark, every wag of the tail, Snow reminded Daniel of the power of bravery, loyalty, and love. Ravi woke up early the next morning. The forest around him was calm, filled with the soft songs of birds and the cool smell of damp earth. He sat up and looked at the items he had placed beside him the night before. The crystal still glowed faintly. The medallion rested on the soft cloth, and the wooden cylinder and journal lay open beside it. The sunlight filtered through the trees, lighting the ground in golden patches. Ravi felt rested, but his mind was full of questions. He knew that Aaron had planned every step carefully, and he was certain that the final clue still waited for him. The chamber had taught him patience, focus, and courage, but there had to be more. Something still connected all the pieces together. He took out Oren's journal and opened it to the last few pages. The handwriting was steady, though faint from age. The final page had only a few lines written in it. "When you understand the value of what you already have, the last door will open. Look not for more, but for meaning." Ravi read the words several times, thinking deeply about their meaning. He realized that Aaron was teaching him something important, that true discovery was not about collecting things, but about understanding their purpose. Every object he had found had a lesson. The crystal taught him to see light in the dark. The wooden cylinder taught him patience. The journal taught him observation. The medallion taught him courage. Ravi packed his things and began to walk toward the edge of the forest. The air was crisp and fresh, and he felt a quiet energy growing inside him. The compass in his hand seemed to pulse gently, as if guiding him once again. He followed it until he reached a wide clearing where the trees stood tall and silent. In the center of the clearing stood a large stone structure covered in moss and vines. It looked ancient but strong. Ravi approached it slowly. There were carvings on the surface similar to the ones in the hidden chamber. As he brushed the moss away, he saw symbols of the same kind that had guided him before, circles, lines, and small patterns that seemed to move when he looked at them. At the base of the structure, there was a small opening shaped exactly like the medallion he carried. He took the medallion from his pocket and placed it into the opening. A faint vibration ran through the ground and a quiet sound echoed from inside the stone. Slowly, the structure began to shift and a narrow doorway appeared before him. Ravi stepped inside carefully, holding the crystal to light his way. The space inside was quiet and filled with dust. There were no treasures, no gold or jewels. Only a table stood in the center of the room. On it rested an old leather wallet worn with age but familiar. Ravi froze. It was the same kind of wallet he had bought from the flea market. The same size, the same color, even the same faint design on the edge. He reached for it slowly, almost afraid to touch it. When he opened it, he found a folded note and a small photograph inside. The photograph showed a younger Aaron, smiling, standing beside a man who looked just like Ravi. Ravi's breath caught in his chest. He looked closer and realized that the man in the photo was his grandfather. The note inside the wallet was written in the same neat handwriting as the journal. It read, "To the one who finds this path, know that our family's strength has always been in curiosity, kindness, and courage. This wallet once belonged to your grandfather. It carries no money, only memories and meaning. You have followed the same steps he once did. You are the continuation of what he started." Ravi stood still, the note trembling in his hands. The truth settled in slowly. The wallet he had bought at the flea market was not random. It had belonged to his own family. Somehow, through time and chance, it had found its way back to him. Arun had been his grandfather's closest friend and partner in exploration. Together, they had hidden the clues and lessons so that someday a future member of their family could rediscover them. Tears filled Ravi's eyes, but his heart felt full. All the questions, all the long walks, all the puzzles, all the objects, they were never about finding treasure. They were about rediscovering family, understanding heritage, and carrying forward the lessons of the past. He sat on the floor and read the note again, his mind full of memories. He thought about his grandfather, who had always told him stories about patience and curiosity when he was a child. At the time, Ravi never realized that those stories were part of something greater. Now he finally understood. The walls of the room were carved with words and symbols. When he looked closely, he saw phrases that matched those in the journal, teachings about courage, truth, and purpose. He realized that the chamber was not a tomb or a vault. It was a message left behind by those who wanted future generations to value wisdom over wealth. Ravi placed the note back into the wallet and held it to his heart. He felt a sense of peace that he had never known before. The mystery of the wallet had brought him here, but what he had truly found was a connection to his family's legacy. After a while, he stood and walked out of the chamber. The sunlight outside felt warm and bright on his face. He took one last look at the stone structure and smiled. He understood now that Aaron's final lesson was simple. The greatest discoveries are not made by finding something new, but by understanding what has always been there. Ravi walked through the forest, feeling lighter with every step. When he reached the edge of the trees, he turned back once more and whispered, "Thank you, Aaron." A gentle breeze moved through the branches, and for a moment, it felt as if the forest itself was answering him. He made his way home, carrying the wallet carefully in his pocket. The medallion hung around his neck. The crystal was tucked safely in his bag, and the journal rested under his arm. When he reached his small house, he placed all the objects on his table and looked at them quietly. He decided to continue what his grandfather and Aaron had started. He would write everything he had learned, the clues, the lessons, the journey, and leave it for the next generation. The knowledge should never be lost again. That night, Ravi sat by his lamp and began to write in a new notebook. His handwriting was steady, filled with purpose. He started with the first line, "I found an old wallet at a flea market and it changed my life forever." He wrote about the clues, the forest, the journal, and the chamber. He wrote about the lessons of patience, courage, and understanding. As he wrote, he smiled, knowing that one day, someone else might read his words and begin their own journey of discovery. When he finished, he closed the notebook and placed it inside the wallet, along with Arun's note and the photograph. He tied it with a small ribbon and placed it safely inside a wooden box. The box would remain hidden, waiting for someone who was curious enough to find it again. As he prepared to sleep, Ravi felt calm and fulfilled. His life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. What had started as a simple purchase at a flea market had led him through forests, puzzles, and ancient chambers. It had taught him about courage, patience, and love. But most of all, it had taught him that the real treasures of life were not material things, but the lessons and connections that stay in the heart. Before turning off the light, he looked once more at the medallion hanging from his neck. It gleamed softly in the lamplight, a symbol of everything he had learned. He whispered quietly, "Thank you for guiding me." The next morning, Ravi woke to the soft rays of the sun. The forest outside seemed alive and the world felt new again. He smiled and decided to live his life with the same curiosity and kindness that had brought him here. The wallet had changed his life not because of what was inside, but because of what it had helped him discover within himself. And so, the story that began with a simple wallet became a legacy of understanding, patience, and courage, passed from one generation to another, waiting for the next curious soul to continue the journey.